Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna min fadlika 'ilman wa ta'lima innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's try that again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There we go. YouTube is not going to answer me. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you guys for coming out. Alhamdulillah. We are here at the 10th lesson of the Axis of Faith, Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith explained. And we're going to look at Hadiths number 32 to 34 today. Alhamdulillah. Some very axial concepts and principles that we'll cover today. In the first Hadith, which is the Hadith number 32, called Cause No Harm Nor Return Harm. Okay? In other words, don't harm and don't harm people back either. And it goes like this. An Abi Sa'id ibn Sinan al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam قال لا ضرر ولا ضرار. حديث حسن راه ابن ماجه والدارقطني وغيرهما مسندا. ورواه مالك في الموطأ مرسلا عن عمرو بن يحيى عن أبيه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسقط أبا سعيد وله طرق يقوي بعضها بعضا. And it is related on the authority of Abu Sa'id Sa'd ibn Malik ibn Sinan al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, there is no causing harm nor returning harm in our religion. There is no causing harm nor returning harm in our religion. And this is a hadith that is Hasan, narrated by Ibn Majah and Daraqutni and others who relate it as being of a sound isnad. And Imam Malik also narrated it in his Muwatta with a broken chain from Amr ibn Yahya, from his father, straight to the Prophet ﷺ. But he dropped the name of the Sahabi, who's Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. So it's called a Mursal hadith, according to Imam Malik. But this hadith has different lines of transmission, which strengthen each other, so it becomes sound in its isnad. If I want to say this hadith in a colloquial way, I would say this. Don't harm anyone, whether you started it or not. That's basically the bottom line of the hadith. Do not harm anyone, whether you started it or not. Why? Because we know the principle about harm, right? We understand that there's something, there are laws in Islam, there are guidances and teachings that everybody would say, you shouldn't hurt anybody or oppress anyone. However, that being said, what about if someone hurts you first? Can you get them back? Right? Are you allowed to, someone pushes you, can you push them back? Someone double parks and blocks you. Can you next time double park and block them? They slash your tires, can you slash their tires? They backbite about you, can you backbite about them? So these are all questions. Can you do that's returning a harm. And harm, it means much more than just like hitting. People think it just means hitting here. What it means, harm, is the opposite of benefit. It is the opposite of benefit. So instead of giving benefit to someone, you give the opposite of that, which is what we call darar or harm. It could be from something like an inconvenience. It could be some sort of abuse. It could be some sort of kind of a slight to their reputation. It could be many different things. And of course, then with that comes hitting someone, fighting them, torturing them, killing them. These types of things are all types of harm. And every type of harm is a dhulm. Every time you harm something, and that is of course without justification from the sacred law, that is a type of dhulm. And dhulm, what we mean by dhulm is oppression. Oppression means putting something, وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ وَفِي غَيْرِ مَكَانِهِ. Putting something in other than its proper place is the root meaning of dhulm. So when you harm someone, it is a dhulm because you are putting your harm or you're inflicting something other than where it's supposed to be, meaning on an innocent person. And so there were differences of opinion as to what exactly is meant by darar and dirar. Those two words that are very closely related, darar and dirar. And so the ulama reflected about this and talked about this. And some said what it means is, linguistically, it means that you neither allow harm to reach someone of their own accord, nor do you cause it to someone else. Okay, so you can see that a person's about to be harmed by something of their own doing. You try to stop or prevent that or discourage that, and then you also don't inflict harm on them yourself. Others said what it means is that when you have a benefit to yourself coming to you, but a harm coming towards someone else. So I'll give you an example. They said it means, for example, if I want to, and they actually use this example, if I want to build another story of my house, but it's going to look directly over the private area of my neighbor's house, where his women would be in their yard without hijab. That's considered darar to my neighbor. Manfa'a to me, a blessing to my neighbor, a blessing to me because let's say I want to build a second floor, but I'm looking straight into that person's house. That's a harm to that person, right? This is, obviously classically speaking. Just other things you could say, I want to throw out my garbage, so I throw it into my neighbor's property. Obviously, I benefit, especially in times when they didn't have waste removal. Like right now, we put our garbage out every week, someone picks it up. What about in a time when you slaughter a cow or you slaughter a sheep and you have nowhere to put it? So by me getting rid of it, putting it in someone else's property, I'm harming them and benefiting myself. This is, of course, categorically, all types of harm are haram. There's only one letter, it's A missing between harm and haram. Every single type, whether it's a big or whether it's a small one, whether it's much or little, it's all haram. And why? Because they say, what is it? An-nafi fi siyaq what is it? An-nakira fi siyaq an-nafi ta'um. So what that means is that whenever you have a negation that is in the context of a indefinite word, then what it means is a general ruling of all the different types of ruling. So for example, if I say, the apple is not in my home, it means a certain apple. It doesn't mean every single apple. There could be another apple that's in my home. If I said, there's no apple in my home, an apple is not in my home, that means all types of apples are not in my home. There is not an apple in my house. Okay, for example, that's just a linguistic example. So when Allah says, when the Prophet says, "La darara wa la dirara," there is no harm. It doesn't mean like, oh, there's a specific type of harm that you can do, and another that you can't. It means any type of harm or harming someone back is not permissible. And the other meaning is they say it's similar to the word qatl and qital. Qatl means to slay someone, and qital means to fight someone. Right? It's like what they call the form 3, right? Fa'ala yufa'ilu, qatala yuqatilu. It means to fight one another. There's an aspect of something being mutual. It involves two or more people. So they said darar is to cause that harm to someone, and dirar is two people are causing harm to each other, back and forth, right? They also said it means that they also said that dirar means that you also harm the person who harmed you. You harm them back in a way that you do not even go beyond the way that they harmed you. So they push you, you push them back. That's dirar. Even that is not allowed. Just imagine that. So they harm you, and you harm them back. You don't go beyond. If you go beyond, then that's even more. That's ziyada. That's dhulm. So it is to harm someone back in a way that they harmed you, and not more than that. It's also to start something between two people, to two sides. So you start harm. It could also be when you get your rights from someone. So let's say, for example, someone steals something from you. They push you, they take your wallet, they run away. You catch up to them, you push them, you take your wallet back, right? So now you've done a reciprocation, but you did that reciprocation, that's not dirar, because you were doing it to get your right back. So you did that to get your right back. Now, that person, when you've gotten your right back, do you still hit them at that point? That is dirar. That's one of the meanings of dirar. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَدِّ الْأَمَانَةِ إِلَى مَنِ ائْتَمَنَكَ وَلَا تَخُنْ مَنْ خَانَكَ. Allah said that the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that fulfill the trust to those who entrusted you, and do not betray the one who betrayed you. So someone who betrays you, you're going to betray them. That's not allowed. This idea that one spouse cheats on one spouse, so the other spouse does a revenge cheat on that spouse. All that is all from the shaitan to try to get both people into the haram. But it's one of the things that's very difficult to look out for. And so the first thing we have to understand, right, is we talked about the harm is something that is oppression, and oppression is something that is haram. It is something that is not lawful. The other thing is the temptation to strike back, right? It is human nature when you are harmed that you want to harm people back. It gets you angry. It's something that, even when you look at a baby, okay, when a baby is upset or offended, even they will give you a little slap in the face or something like that. So this is something that, or they'll push another baby, even though they haven't been taught that. So this is something that's part of human nature. And so the temptation this is why that word is covered, because somebody could even say, look, I don't harm anybody, but he started it, so I have a right to get him back. And this is where the Prophet takes that part out, because the majority of fights today, it's always started by somebody, but you don't care who started it. You want it to stop, right? I mean, how many times do we say, he started, no, you said this, no, you said that. So if we say, okay, don't do harm first, that's it, everybody will say, you wrong me. So this is why that those two sides have to be covered. And the other thing, as we mentioned as well, the harm is not just hitting. It's any type of annoyance. It's any type of taking of rights that a person could be affected by, right? And it's also very important that, so even linguistically, when you look at this hadith, they have like the subject and the predicate in English. The house is beautiful. Subject and a predicate, mubtada and khabar. This sentence in Arabic, its predicate is actually not there. It's mahdhuf. How do they say mahdhuf in English? It's not mentioned. So when the Prophet ﷺ says there is no harm or reciprocating harm, the predicate of that is, well, although that sentence in English makes sense, but what it says in Arabic is no harm in our religion. There is no harming someone in our sharia. There is no harming someone in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's how it's meant to be. And obviously it means that in some cases there are exceptions. As always, we have to remember something. The hadiths always have exceptions. Bismillah. The jurists extract these exceptions by looking at the rest of the holistic laws of Islam. So someone can't say, oh, la darar wa la dirar, no harm and no harming back, therefore there's no had punishment in Islam. There's no more defending yourself against oppression, because you can't harm anybody back. So if someone comes to you with a gun, you just have to, that's it. You can't say anything. No, that's not what the hadith is saying. Or la darar wa la dirar, that you are not, for example, you cannot discipline your child, physically speaking, lightly, because there's no darar wa la dirar. So obviously it means it's darar when there's no manfa', it's a harm. There's no manfa', there's no benefit. There's no wajh of the wajh shar'i. There is no sacred legal concept that makes that permissible, right? There's no sacred concept. Of course, there are other ulama who said that darar and dirar actually mean the same thing, but it's just said as a matter of ta'keed, because darar is ism, and they said dirar is implying the action of doing harm. So there's no harm and there's no doing harm as well. That's what some ulama have said. But the bottom line that we understand, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man darra darrahullah, wa man shaqqa shaqqahullah." Well, that whoever harms someone, Allah will harm that person. Subhanallah. And whoever goes hard on someone, is severe on them, makes things difficult for someone, Allah will become difficult on that person. So just imagine it's enough to give us pause. That anytime you can think about, like, is my garbage, for example, I left my garbage can open overnight and some raccoon got inside it, and now my neighbor's lawn is strewn with garbage. I did harm to that person. So you harm someone, you have to try to fix it, because when you harm people, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is what the hadith is saying. So may Allah protect us and make everything easy. And it also means that when you talk about a darar, often they're talking about it in the context of neighbors. So it tells you how important the rights of neighbors are. When a lot of the examples that the commentators give are your neighbor's house, you want to let's say, for example, the houses used to be conjoined back in those times. So you want to drill into your wall, and that's going to drill directly into your neighbor's house, because you're sharing a wall. So you drill into your wall to hang something or whatever, and you can see a hole into your neighbor's house. That's a darar as well. And however, the ulama say this is when their effect lasts or causes some lasting harm. So for example, it is darar for you to operate a loud machinery in your house all the time. So they mentioned having a grinding stone inside your house will disturb your neighbor with loud noise all the time, grinding things. Or if you're always, one of your jobs is that you're always, let's say you're running like a saw or something like that makes a lot of noise. Or you operate a furnace, or you operate a big industrial oven inside your home. All of that smell and all the smoke is going to go towards your neighbor. Now, okay, your neighbor may not like that you cook with heavy curry spices, but what you do it like once, and you try not to harm your neighbor, you air it out or whatever, that's different. But if you're doing something so constantly, that's when it becomes a dirar. And as we know, that this hadith is actually a very big hadith that's used in usul, because there are 4 sources of our law that are agreed upon, right? That there's the Quran, there's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's qiyas, and there's ijma'. There is analogical reasoning and consensus of the mujtahid scholars. Those are 4 different types of sources of law. But there are mechanisms of law, as Ibn al-Mulaqqin tells us, Shaykh Ibn al-Mulaqqin, that there are 14 other, you could say, types of considerations that come into law that are not that are different sub-branches of these reasonings. However, they are not, they're disagreed upon. Istihsan, which is like a subtle reasoning. There's maslaha, which is, there's things like public benefit. There's things like sadd al-dharaya, averting, blocking the means to something wrong. So not harming and not returning harm actually becomes a legal principle itself. It's not just an exhortation of like, you shouldn't hurt anybody, but it's actually a legal principle that what you're going to do, is this going to cause harm to other people? Then don't do it. So a lot of people don't realize. They'll say, okay, I want to play my nasheeds very loud and I'm having a wedding, so I don't care. I'm going to play it very loud. Well, there's an elderly person sleeping next door. There are babies in the neighborhood. Or I want to put the adhan on, blast the adhan, in a neighborhood where non-Muslims are, living together with Muslims. It's a non-Muslim country, and it's very, very high. So somebody will say, well, where's the Quran and Hadith to say that you can't do that? Tell me where that is. Okay, what about business practices? Different types of monopolies and things like this. What about when you don't have like rent control and you can just keep raising the rent on someone who is a tenant in your house and they're out of a home? So this is why even in secular law, they understood this principle about causing harm. But in the deen, the sharia, it was there from the beginning. So the hadith now becomes not only a moral exhortation, but a legal maxim that now enters into so many babs of fiqh. So when you read something like Al-Ashbah wa Nadhair by Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi, when you talk about our texts in different madhahib too, of legal reasoning, the hadith actually becomes an asl or a legal principle itself without having to change it. So that might be a little bit of a technical consideration. And then, so basically what the last point before we move on to the next hadith that it tells us is that a Muslim treads lightly on the earth. A Muslim is a type of person, an ideal believer, even if they're not doing very many acts of good, even if they aren't, praying more than everyone else, they're not more learned, than the average person. But the Prophet ﷺ said to somebody asked, what should I do? Like, tell me good acts to do. He said, do this. They said, what if I can't do that? He said, then do this. What if I can't do that? Then do this good deed. Help someone. Do that. Do this. Then he said, then what if I can't do any of those things? They said, then just save people from your harm, from your adha, from your disturbance and annoyance. Just save that. And that's enough of a good deed. That if you can walk around in your life and neither your family, nor your co-workers, nor your neighbors, nor anyone else can say, this person vexes me, this person has disturbed or annoyed or harmed me. This is a believer. Right? Alladhina, what is it? Wa ibadu rahman alladhina yamshuna ala al-ardi hawna. Right? They are the servants of the most merciful who tread on this earth lightly. They don't leave a footprint behind. No one to complain about them. There's no one to say, you owe me this and you owe me that and you did this to me. So this is what the hadith is trying to emphasize. The next hadith is hadith number 33, and it's called claims are by proof only. Claims are by proof only. And this hadith goes as follows. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لو يعطى الناس بدعواهم لادعى رجال أموال قوم ودماءهم لكن البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر حديث حسن رواه البيهقي وغيره هكذا وبعضه في الصحيحين. On the authority of Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with father and son, because both father and son were Sahabi, that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, if people were given everything they claimed, if people were given everything that they claimed was theirs, men would unjustly claim the wealth and lives of other people. Instead, the burden of proof is upon the one making the claim, and taking an oath is for the one denying a claim. Let's just keep that hadith there for a second, right? Let's read it again. If people were given everything that they claimed was theirs, then some men would unjustly claim the wealth and lives of other people. But instead, the burden of proof is upon the one making the claim, and taking an oath is only for the one who is denying the claim. And the reason why this is important, let's talk a little bit about the background. So, in the past, right? How do, for example, we have legal problems coming up all the time in society, and this is why we have court systems to deal with them. In every single society, alhamdulillah, especially in the modern world, there are judicial systems. Islam had its own Islamic courts, but even here, you make a claim against somebody. Right. Now, there was one thing about the Arabs, which was well known, was that their word, their kalima, was something that was mu'tabar. It was something that was, when they say something or they swear on something, then most likely they're not lying. There comes a time, however, when that legendary truthfulness would reduce. And there are always types of people in every society who will lie in order to get a right or take advantage. So there are so many different areas where legal claims can be made. I mean, look at business. Okay, if you go to a judge and you say, my business partner stole $100,000 from me. Okay, now what will the judge say? Obviously, where's your proof? But if the person says, no, I swear I swear an oath, and they swear an oath by Allah, that this person stole $100,000 from me. Is an oath enough? If a person is very religious, mashallah, the most authoritative scholar in the world, says, I swear, takes an oath, I swear that this lady is my wife. And she's like, I'm not your wife, or whatever. Then how is it that, so you cannot just take somebody on their claim like that. This is what the hadith is saying. So because we often do this, when we favor someone or we think that they're right or they're correct, we accept their claim on an oath. But this is the problem now. If the Prophet ﷺ is saying, yes, when people are true and honest, then you can say, fine, this happens. But what happens when people start lying about these things? And people start claiming this and claiming that falsely. So can anyone just say, oh, that car is actually my car. That horse is my horse. No, the judge will say now, what is your proof? Al-bayyinatu ala al-mudda'i. Al-mudda'i is the claimant, the one who is making the claim, the plaintiff, right? So that person has to bring forward their proof. And who is the one who gets to deny? Now, if you make a claim against somebody, you say, I claim this is my horse. You stole $100,000. Okay, I don't have proof. The judge will turn to the one who is being accused, the defendant, and say, do you accept this claim? He says, no, I deny this claim. So you're denying the claim. Do you have proof? No, I don't have proof. Take an oath. That's where that person takes an oath. That person is denying. No, I swear I do not owe this person $100,000. Okay, that's it. Because that person doesn't. So if you have proof, then that is admissible in a court to make a claim against somebody. If you don't have a proof to make a claim, your oath is not enough. But if a claim is made against you without proof, then your oath is enough to defend yourself. So you can deny something, I swear that's not true. Finish. However, swearing about something was also something that the Arabs and the early Muslims did not like. They didn't like to swear by Allah, even if it was something. So many times they would do what they call like nakala. They would forfeit their right rather than take an oath. So somebody comes and says, this person owes me $10,000. And the judge says, what's your proof? He says, I don't have a proof, but this person owes me $10,000. The judge can turn to the other person and say, okay, do you owe this guy $10,000? No. Well, can you swear that you don't owe him? He said, I'm not going to swear. So that's different if he doesn't want to swear, but he has the right to do that. Now, if the Prophet is looking ahead in time, he's saying that if everybody got everything they claimed, then people would start claiming the wealth and the lives of other people. So what would they do? They would go and start saying, this person committed murder. This person is a murderer. And you have no proof of that. So innocent people would go to jail. Innocent people would get the death penalty. Right? So this is where the effect of that. Again, you're seeing now a hadith. Imam Nawawi is bringing a hadith that has legal import. The one before as well was a legal maxim. This is also a great legal maxim. In fact, Bukhari and Muslim narrated this hadith as well as the narrators of the Sunan narrations from Ibn Abbas as well. And so this is the hadith that is considered the greatest hadith in terms of disputation. In terms of actual judicial proceedings, this hadith became the most representative of that tradition. And the ulama agreed that in matters of money, an oath is sufficient for the one who is claimed against, so the defendant, right? Now, some said it is wajib to take this oath. Some said because the Prophet is saying that wal yaminu ala man ankar. The oath is on the one who denies. So they're saying it was wajib. Some ulama said that it is wajib, and some said that it applies to divorce and marriage. So for example, man and woman come together, and the woman said, my husband divorced me. I'm a free woman now. I can marry somebody else now. After my iddah is over, he divorced me. And the husband saying, no, I did not divorce her. Right? So there are differences in different schools about whose word is taken. But Imam Abu Hanifa felt that if a person does not agree to take the oath to deny in the matters of divorce and marriage and freeing a slave, then if they deny taking an oath, then the other person automatically gets their right, wins the case. So sometimes a person, it becomes something that, those are legal details. But the bottom line being, so let's go through our lessons of the hadith. The first thing is that people's rights must be safeguarded. In Islam, this is one of the most highest objectives. Why? So because if you don't have a just society, you cannot operate on the higher aspects of religion without that. If you try, for example, removing, authority from a Muslim country, and we've seen this how many times, you remove the police, remove the governor, remove the president, the sultan, and everything just goes haywire because there's no more system anymore. And so the violence increases, infighting, sectarianism, looting and stealing, and you can't go to the masjid. You can't do this. Rights are being trampled and violated. So you can't actually practice your religion if you don't have people's rights safeguarded. And if you don't have some way of knowing who is right and who is wrong, or you should actually say how to decide disputes, then people will just take things from each other and they will not get justice, right? And then when people don't get justice in court, bismillah, if there's no way of getting justice in court, what happens? People say, well, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. And they bear arms, which is what the Arabs used to do. It was might is right. You take something from someone, if they have a strong tribe and they can fight you and get you and get it back, then they win. Might is right. If they're not strong enough, then you're right. Islam came to change this, you see. Or if I'm a prominent person, what I say, people will accept it. And if you're not a prominent person, when I accuse you, you're not prominent. I will not accept it. Or a husband, because people sometimes some societies might favor men and they won't believe women or the wives when they claim something. All of this, a master and a slave. The slave is saying, my master this person freed me. I'm free. So this is why these things were brought into order, because people's rights, if they're not safeguarded, you don't have a basis to practice religion after that. And that's why these rights were built into our deen. It's not just about praying and fasting. It's about rights of other people and safeguarding them. Then again, it's not only about that as well, but the reality of the world as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us the reality of the world, because without a justice system, greed would actually take over people's thinking, right? And so the reality of the world is that if you leave people long enough without any sort of system to contain them and control them, eventually people start taking advantage of each other. And greed hits the nafs. And this is where, just look at all the time, since I came back to Canada, every single day I get scam calls from some call center in subcontinent, telling me to give me this number, threatening me about this to take my money. I'm shocked. Greed is so alive that people are trying to scam you all the time. You're always getting these emails or you're getting these messages to try to get people to do that. So and so that's one thing. It's the reality of the world is built on greed. The Prophet is saying, don't rely on people's religious credentials, their this and that. Now, why is it that the oath is given for the one who is defending? Because that person, if you claim something from someone, you're trying to get something that is not originally in your possession, right? If you're saying that person, that car is my car. So you don't have that car. That person has the car. So that's why I have to bring proof to take something out of someone's possession. Because the asl is, if you have something, if you have possession, it's yours. If I'm looking at you and I'm looking at your jacket, the asl of that, the original ruling is that must be your jacket. You walked in with these shoes, they must be your shoes. So I need to introduce something to overcome the original state, which is the assumption that things are belonging to the people in whose possession they are found in. But the oath is because why should you part? Why should you have to bring proof? Do I have to see a receipt to see if that jacket is yours? No, because it's the asl, the original ruling is that it's in your possession. So anyways, alhamdulillah, there's many details that we can get to about that. But alhamdulillah, so a just system is one of the blessings of Islam. It's one of the big blessings of Islam. And we understand the importance of proof, but it's not just on legal situations, right? So we understand one thing is that look at the role that proof plays in Islam, but it's a larger aspect of deen. I mean, there's a whole surah of Quran called Surah Al-Bayyinah, same word. لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة. That the people of the book and the idolaters were not in disagreement with one another until there came to them a clear evidence and a proof. When the Quran came, it itself is the bayinah. And so that idea of a proof coming down, that this is a word of Allah and tells you what happened and what didn't happen. Jesus was not crucified. This did not happen. That did not happen. And then all of a sudden the people of the book are now, oh my gosh, what is Islam claiming? What is the Quran claiming? So the importance of proof here is so important that our iman itself rests on the entire idea of proof. Okay, do you believe this is something you can worship this object? Hatu burhanakum. Bring forward your evidence. Now there are different words for evidence as well. There's hujjah, there's dalil, there's bayyina, there's burhan. They all have different connotations, right? A bayyina, as we know, makes something clear. Bayan, it's something that clarifies something, right? So this is why that importance of proof is there. It's not only a proof of we not only use proof in our own iman. So we even to believe in our aqidah, we want to have some evidence. Why do we believe Allah is one? Are we just Muslim because our parents are Muslim? This is how the ulama talked about this. The theologians talked about this. Or do you have to have at least some little inkling of an idea of like your own little type of logic and proof? Well, who made the world? Allah. Okay, well that's my proof that Allah exists. Who else made the world? That's enough, And then you understand as well the importance of proof comes in proving what the Messenger ﷺ said. So any ruling that you have in deen, right? What's the proof? This is the proof. Okay, what about the proof this is even a hadith? This is the isnad. That's a proof. So if we didn't have this evidence, our entire deen would not be preserved. It would not come to us today. So it's like the judicial aspect and the legal aspect is actually connected to the transmission and preservation of deen. And then that is also connected to our iman itself. So our the justice, Allah tatghaw fil mizan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created things in a balance, right? So that balance is tied to the world and beyond. And then the final thing is the importance, the role of an oath that you do have in our time. Even up to our time, they put their hand on the Bible and they swear an oath. Now, I don't know if they still, I think they call it solemn affirmation. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? So the role of the oath from the beginning for a Muslim was very important. Nowadays, it's just seen as like, you do it in court and that's it. It's not that. It wasn't a court matter only. It was because the word of a Muslim is so binding that when he invokes or she invokes Allah, that becomes something morally binding in this world and in the next life. You gave your kalima. So this is why you can even get out of a court case by saying, no, I swear this is not the case. So this is something that is very, very important to understand the role of the oath. These days, we've lost this importance of our words. So we say, wallah, billah, alayk, uqsim billah, da, 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 da. We say this all the time. You see people like joking around on TikTok videos saying, wallahi, billahi, uqsim billah. So this is not something that we should play around with, and it is something where we take very seriously as a religious matter, not just as a matter of judicial proceeding. In the last and final hadith of today, alhamdulillah, another hadith with legal implications. Bismillah. However, this is a bit longer in its considerations, and this is the hadith that changing evil with the hand, tongue, and heart. An Abi Sa'id al-Khudri. Let's put the hadith up. An Abi Sa'id al-Khudri رضي الله تعالى عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان رواه Muslim. That on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, say, whoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And if they are not able to do so, then let them change it with their tongue. And if they are not able to do so, then with their heart. And that is the weakest of faith. Let's repeat that one more time. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And if he is not able to, meaning not able to change it with his hand, let him change it with his tongue. And if he's not able to do so with his tongue even, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. What does it mean, subhanAllah? What's the context of the hadith, first of all? Let's look back at the context. In the time when Marwan ibn Hakam was the governor of Medina, he did something that the Sahaba, they said that the Prophet never used to do this. Okay, what was it? It was that in the khutbah of Eid, in the Eid Salah, you're supposed to pray the Eid prayer and then give the khutbah. However, I think perhaps because people would pray the Eid Salah and then go, as the governor, as the ruler of that land, he wanted to give the khutbah before the Eid prayer, just like you do on Friday. So he went to go do that, and in one hadith, a man stood up and said, what you're doing is wrong. The khutbah is supposed to be after the Eid prayer. And Marwan, apparently it said that he objected to this man, and that's why Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the companion, was in the audience. Marwan was not a Sahabi, right? Marwan was a Tabi. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is Sahabi. So then Abu Sa'id al-Khudri put up his hand. In another narration, he pulled the hand of Marwan as he went to stand up on the mimbar. He pulled it, saying, I heard that man is right to say what he said to you, because I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying, whoever of you sees a munkar, an evil or a wrong, then you should change it with your hand. And if you're not able, then with your tongue. And then he narrated the rest of the hadith. So that man could not stop the governor physically from going up on the mimbar. So he spoke out. Hey, this is not right. You're changing the sunnah. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri actually himself took the hand. He was an older, venerable companion. He could actually grab the hand and say, don't go upright like that. So that's the context of the hadith. It comes in a situation of correcting someone else. And someone saying, are you able to just correct me like that? And he's saying, yes, he can correct you. And this is the proof that you can correct someone. And some people said that it is a wajib thing to try to change something wrong. First of all, what is munkar? As you know, munkar from the word nakira, like it is ankara yunkiru. It is to deny something. It's to find it. It's to not recognize something. It's to find it strange or bad. When you don't recognize something, recognize someone, that is a person who's it's munkar. Munkar is evil. Munkar is something that every single person knows it's wrong. That's what a munkar is. That's why people deny it, because everybody knows killing is wrong. They deny it. They don't like it. They don't recognize it. That's why a good act, it's actually called a ma'ruf. It's something that is known. Ma'ruf is something that's known. So why is a good deed known as something? Because everyone knows it's a good thing, and everyone rejects a munkar. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying now that some ulama say it's wajib now. This hadith is saying, whoever sees a wrong, man ra'a minkum munkaran, any munkar. Again, you have a nakira, an indefinite word. He's not saying, Prophet ﷺ is not saying, whoever sees that wrong happening. Which wrong? We don't know. No, any wrong. Then فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ. This is an imperative tense, a form of the imperative, which is that person should change it. And this is also a part of what they call nasiha fi din. We took this hadith earlier on, the 40 hadith, ad-dinu nasiha. That deen is meaning well. Some people say it's giving advice. How? For who? For Allah and His book and His. And so this idea of nasiha fi din, some people could object. Now some people do object. Why do you have the right to tell me I'm doing something wrong? Like, what's an example of doing something wrong? You see someone swearing at someone, yelling at them and swearing at them. For example, and you have an influence over this person. You say, hey, don't do that. That's not right. Now, if that person turns around and says, every soul will bear its own burdens. Why do you have to tell me? وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. That no one will bear the burdens of another soul. So you have no right to tell me that. Right? Or that you will not be accountable for what they do. There are different narrations and different proofs that you will not be taken into account. So then, however, what the ulama say is, and this is what often happens, you tell someone, don't do this, and they say, it's not your business, mind your own business. I'm going to go in front of my Lord, you're going to go in front of your Lord. But you don't realize this hadith now makes it a burden morally on you to say something. So now you're not saying something because you are tasked with changing the other person. You are just tasked with forbidding the evil. Whether they do it or not, whether they accept or not, that's up to you. So you must, that's called nahiyan al-munkar. From amr bil ma'ruf wa nahiyan al-munkar, commanding the good and forbidding the evil. So when you see that nahiyan al-munkar, your job is to do the nahi, the forbidding. Whether they have the qabul, that's not in your hands. Allah will not ask you, why didn't you change that person's heart? Why didn't you fix that? But did you actually stand up for it? Right? And so that's it becomes our moral burden. So now you can't just say, look, that person is drinking alcohol and you're telling them don't do that. Well, it's in my book of deeds, not yours. No. Now by me not saying something, it's a sin on me. So I have to say something to you. That's the point. They also say that commanding, so subhanAllah, so commanding the good and forbidding the evil, it is a fard kifaya actually. It is a fard kifaya to see something wrong, when you see something wrong, to try to change it in different ways. So fard kifaya here means that it is a duty that if no one does it, everybody will be sinful. But if someone does it, at least one person, then it will relieve the sin from everyone else. However, sometimes it is fard ayn to forbid the wrong, meaning sometimes a specific person is the only one that either they know what's going on, or they're capable, or they're knowledgeable, or powerful enough. Because what the ulama say is when you change something with your hand, you have to have the authority to be able to do that. Now, some of the ulama said, no, anybody can do that. So, you see somebody else with an instrument or a bottle of wine, you can smash it, and you can, there are some opinions. But generally speaking, the ulama said, no. To change something with your hand, that's something that only the government can do. Because otherwise, can you walk around and start hitting people and stuff like that in public? You can't. But where can you do that? You can do that with your own children. Your children are stealing. Your children are coloring on the wall. Yeah, you can change that with your hand. Take the crayon away from them. You might have to discipline them. That's a different story. You could change it with your hand. But in the case of other people, other free people, okay, case in point, the other day there was an attack in one of the masjids here in Mississauga, and that person, the attacker, was tackled by a brave young man and other people in the masjid. That's what you call فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. You saw someone getting sprayed and attacked in the masjid, right? And so you changed it with your hand. That person, subhanAllah, has a very high level of reward, inshallah, in front of Allah, right? Because it's very different. Because at that time, someone's trying to pepper spray you and attack you with an axe. If you start saying, no, please stop, don't do it. I'm not the police, so I can't arrest you. What are you going to, that's not the thing to do at that time. So you're going to be doing the lower thing. So you would have to do the higher thing. Now, what happens if you try to do something, let's say, for example, you don't have the authority to do something. There's a gang. And if you try to attack them, they're stealing money from people. A bully. Okay, let's just say a bully in the schoolyard. And you're in school. And the bully, anybody who tries to fight that bully and tries to stop him from stealing lunch money, that guy will get they'll get hit. So what do? You don't fight that person because you're afraid for yourself. So you don't have to do that level. You can go down one other level to the tongue. فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِلِسَانِهِ. then at least can you say something? Hey buddy, come on, lay off. Come on, stop doing that. You know that's not cool, and they stop. You were able to do that. Maybe you are the only friend who could reach out to that person. Maybe because you are the spouse of that person, it was fardain on you to do that. But then there are other things where the common person doesn't have the knowledge of doing it. So that's why they say that the lisan, the yad is reserved in a public sense for those in government, police, and authority. On a public sense, speaking out is reserved for the ulama, those who know, right? And فَبِقَلْبِهِ, what does everybody else do? They hate it in their heart. That's what they can do, right? And it is not for example, if you see something, there's some things that only you get to see because you see it happening within your family. Other people don't know it's happening. There's abuse happening in your family. That becomes something for you to stop, right? Because outside, how can people know? So now the ulama, some of the ulama also say that even if what if the other person won't accept my stopping them, my commanding them? Now there's a whole different field of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar that we can't take up entirely, but some of the ulama said, even if they won't accept it, you still have to say it. And other ulama like Imam Ghazali will say, if you're sure that they will not listen to you, and it's just or it will cause you harm, or you fear more fitna and more problems, then it's not wajib on you to condemn. So do we have to condemn everybody smoking cigarettes in public? Do we have to condemn everybody not dressing appropriately in public? No, you don't have to go around saying that. Because the high likelihood is that they're not going to accept what you're saying. But if you're in a society, where you can look at an 18-year-old and they say, you're like an uncle type, and you say, hey, what are you doing, man? Smoking a cigarette? Stop that. And they say, oh, sorry. Or you're in a place, in a society where you can say, come on, dress a little bit, this is an inappropriate dress in public. Then if you have that knowledge and that authority, then you can say it, right? But if you don't think, or you think that harm will come to you, this happened in the time of the Sahaba. In fact, the Sahaba, because out of fear for their lives sometimes, they would not say something to the ruler. The ruler would be doing the wrong thing. So even the Sahaba who knew this hadith and were obviously greater in Iman than all of us, even they realized that there are times when you don't have to, somebody tells the dictator of country XYZ that, this is an unjust tax, and they go missing the next day. Do they have to speak out? No, of course not. No, everybody's afraid for their lives. If they speak out against dictator so-and-so, then this is not when you have to do anything. So the other thing is that there are things like, the ulama say that there are things like salat and saum and like good deeds that everyone knows you should be doing. So you're in a Muslim country and a person's just like chomping on a burger outside, okay? You can say to that person, come on, it's Ramadan. What are you doing eating in public? Okay, maybe they're non-Muslim, maybe whatever, but this person shouldn't be eating in public. Ibn Mulaqqin says, all Muslims are ulama of at least this much. At least this much Muslims are ulama of. Zina, drinking alcohol, at least all Muslims are ulama of the fact that you shouldn't be doing this. So when you see this happening, you can say, this is not right, but there are ways of doing it too. So if you're not sure, refrain. However, this is only in things that are mujma alayhi ala hurmatihi. This is condemning the evil is only in things that are there is consensus of the scholars that this is haram. However, if there are differences of opinion, or if the details of this matter are not clear to the layman, they should not condemn. So, for example, can you condemn someone for eating lobster? Oh, they're eating a lobster. You shouldn't be eating a lobster? No. This is why. Because why? Because there are differences of opinion. Maybe someone's eating a lobster in their madhab, their Shafi'i, and it's fine to eat. And as a Hanafi, you're saying, oh, I can't eat lobster. Maybe they're just taking a different opinion. So you cannot actually condemn someone for a difference of opinion. This is why even sometimes scholars have to be careful. Because if the scholar is not a senior scholar, or they're not as studied as someone else, they only know their thing in the deen, their own teachings. They don't realize that there are broader teachings out there, right? This is why the more the higher and more senior a scholar gets, the more they're able to make excuses for other people, right? Whereas sometimes the kind of young, zealous type of teacher or preacher, they're the ones condemning everybody, condemning, and they're like, it's not even wrong, dude. There's another opinion, so and so. So this is why ilm is very important before you speak, and there is no condemning people in areas of difference of opinion, right? Now the importance of this. Let's look at some of the kind of the more importances. Number one is that let's look at the wisdom of evil first of all. Man ra'a minkum munkaran. So a lot of the times this tells us immediately the Prophet ﷺ is acknowledging you are going to see evil in your society, wrong. And it's very important to understand that there is a hikmah in why this was created, right? This is a hikmah, the problem of evil, as they call it, theodicy. So subhanAllah, this is even touching on like theological questions, but not just legal questions. But the wisdom is there, the evil is there among many different reasons and wisdoms. One of them is because it allows a test to take place where the believer sees a wrong and has to act in accordance with how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to act. That's the test for them. So the test and the duty of the believer is in stopping evil. I mean, why didn't the Prophet ﷺ just say the ulama will stop the evil and the rest of the Muslims don't worry about it? Because every Muslim has that test on them. And this is the wisdom of creating evil, to see who is a true believer and who isn't. Because if you say that, well, there's a big problem. If you say that I'm not going to do anything about it, then that evil leads to another one, and it leads to another one until the harm of that evil affects the entire society. So you might see someone drinking and you don't tell them, don't drink, right? Maybe the other thing is this. A lot of people get weak when they like the person or they respect the person. They don't want to forbid the evil. And it's a test. It is a test. Because if you let that person drink, they're going to go out and do that, for example. Then other people will see their example and they'll start doing it too. This is how, if you don't act on this hadith, you start to spread fasad eventually. This is how evil spreads. But if you nip it in the bud early, the community stays on righteousness. This is why any community where people stopped doing nahi anil munkar, people think that religion is all, it's all like, fluffy and flowers and roses. Let's just talk about the good stuff alone. Don't condemn anything from anyone at all, ever. You can't condemn. And if you do that, all of the morals and the values that you have will just go down the tube. And the other problem is not only will their corruption affect you one day too, and your children, but it will also, the adhab of Allah that comes down when people are no longer forbidding the evil, that could hit everyone. So that's another thing. Are you safe from the punishment of Allah coming and enveloping everyone? So some people have to stay on the path of forbidding the evil. And if you can't do it because you're not qualified, you're not authoritative, you're not even knowledgeable, what can you do? فَبِقَلْبِهِ. Then at least, subhanAllah, the wording is amazing. So this just tells us something. Everyone can do something. Never think like it's happening over there. What am I going to do? وَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. How? Change it with your heart. This is very interesting. Now some ulama will say what it means that at least hate it in your heart. But the wording used is then change it with your heart. So even enough people disliking something, it keeps alive the iman that this is haram, this is wrong, this is evil. Because once that starts to leave, once you don't even look at something and see that it's haram, then the belief, that iman in that ruling goes away. Once those rulings goes away, where's the rest of our iman? And eat what you want, drink what you want, sleep with who you want, steal what you want. This is what it becomes. What is there left after that? Right? This is why it's the weakest form of faith. فَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. What do they mean by the weakest form of faith? It means that if it's just hating it with your heart, it has the least fruit. That's why it's the weakest of faith. It bears the least benefit. This is why it's the weakest of faith. And if you are not even brave enough to do this, able to do this, then at least you have confirmed in your heart you still believe it's haram. And if enough people do that, now one of my shaykh asked his shaykh about what is the sign that you still hate something in your heart? Like, how do you do that? Is it just like, how do you do that? How do you do that in your heart? And the physical manifestation is that you frown, he said. So when someone makes a joke about zina, about some sort of deviant sexuality, you don't go ha 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 and smile and laugh. All right, okay. Someone makes a racist joke. You can't stop it. It's just, you're gonna get fired from your job. Someone makes a misogynistic joke even. Someone makes a joke against ethnicity. And I'm talking about where everyone it's like lighthearted and you're understanding. I'm talking about it's like some form of discrimination where you're actually hurting someone else or doing wrong to someone else. And or you hear someone, at least you hate it in your heart. And the other thing is that the laws of forbidding the evil, however, they are very intricate. So one of the problems that happens is people get religious and they take this hadith with zeal and they start to go overboard. They start to take this and go overboard. So they start to, women aren't dressed properly, these vigilantes on the street, hitting them and forcing them to like cover this little bit of hair that's over here. I mean, do they have authority to do that? Or, you're walking around condemning people. And actually what's happening is it's having a reverse effect, right? So example, sometimes some people are smoking cigarettes or they're drinking or whatever, they're out, girlfriend and boyfriend, and you start saying, Akhi, don't you know that's haram? Don't you know blah, blah, blah. You actually, then they say to you, they actually oppose you. The nafs says, I don't care what you say. What are you going to do about it? Oh yeah, well, I'm going to do this and do that and watch me. So now you've actually increased the munkar by what you said. And you thought you were acting on the hadith, right? So now you force this person to pray by beating them. SubhanAllah. Now this person says, I'm never going to pray again because they used to beat me to pray like this. What are you going to do? Right? SubhanAllah. So, I mean, I even know of a guy, one young man who told me that, in their locality in some country, where they were beaten if they weren't praying. Like, I'm talking about adult people. You're not in the masjid beat. They said you would just start praying without wudu because you're just so scared. Because this is the idea gone like to another extreme, right? May Allah guide us and at least this is how it was described to me. I can't judge every single thing on that. But and then the other thing is that when you say something with gentleness, amr bil ma'ruf, it's always more likely that it will be accepted. So remember something, that even if you do speak out, do it privately and not publicly to the extent that you can, right? If you do something in private, you will make that person's heart feel good and it'll bring about a good result. When you do it in public, you humiliate the person, right? And that is another wrong. So people that don't realize, they commit a munkar when they're forbidding the munkar. So it's like fighting haram with haram. What was the point of that? You just did haram. So this is why you have to make sure that you don't cause another evil. And then the other thing is that the Prophet ﷺ said, it's one ra'a minkum munkaran, the one who sees a munkar, not you suspect, not that you think. So you are not allowed to spy on people. You can't do that. You cannot go and start to look into their business and listen on the eavesdrop to try to catch someone. It's different if you're in a police situation or there's some reliable report, or like you're like a parent, you're just trying to make sure your kid is staying out of trouble. That's your job to guide them. That's a different story. But the idea that I suspect that you in your house, you're having these crazy parties and I'm going to jump into your house. There was one of the Sahabi who was in a position of authority and as Khalifa, that gives you a clue. And he jumped over the fence of someone who was listening to singing girls, dancing girls, and drinking wine. And he said, I caught you. He said, you did it wrong by jumping over my fence and invading my privacy. And they had to admit that, right? So we cannot spy and dig into things. So we talked about as well when you can use the hand and how and why and the tongue, and the fact that the heart still has an effect. There's a barakah when you hate things in your heart that inshallah it could still change the wrong, but it is the weakest form of faith. So at the end of the day, where does it go back to? It goes back to the heart. And we'll take questions inshallah now if there's questions. And so what happens is that what it tells you is the heart is the basis of everything. That if something starts in the heart, at least it's there, it can manifest out onto the limbs. If it's not in the heart, it'll never be on the limbs. This is another point that the ulama mentioned about this hadith. What if do you have to be perfect in order to condemn the wrong? The ulama say no. Do you have to be avoiding that sin yourself to condemn it? The ulama say no. So a person who's addicted to some wrong can still tell someone else, do not do that wrong. It's hypocritical? Okay. That's there. But at the same time, it's still better for that person to do this. So someone who is addicted to whatever, they see someone else doing it, they should tell them, do not do this. Why? Because you are called to forbid yourself and forbid others from evil. So if you're not forbidding yourself, then you're not supposed to drop the other one too. Ideally, you should be doing both. Why? Because it's more effective if you are consistent with what you're saying. I mean, how often do we hear, oh, he used to tell everybody not to do it, and look, he's doing it himself. So it's not a condition. It's still better, even if, let's say, a police officer is corrupt, he should still go and enforce the law on other people because it still keeps people that much more safer. That being said, when you do forbid the wrong, do not judge people for it. And do not get pride thinking you're better than them. I'm not talking about what comes into the heart when you don't mean it, but actively thinking like that. Why? Because when you condemn someone for a wrong, as the report says, that one of the punishments, the divine punishments, is that you may commit that sin as well before you pass away because of how you look down on that person. And Allah knows best. May Allah save us and protect us from that. Right? So are there questions now about any of the things that we talked about today? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so anything that was done. So the question is, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like I guess before Islam took root, when things like adultery and fornication were widespread, how did they change? How did they do that? And again, when the laws came down, the guidance came, people had to follow the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if things were done in public, they would be taken to court for that. They would be tried for a punishment. However, and it's a very good point that you make, that we do know that the hypocrites would go out of Medina in the night, in the dark places, and start to try to whisper at women passing by who are trying to use the bathroom in the fields, to try to get them to try to see, are they going to do wrong things? And so this annoyed the believing women very much, that the hypocrites are doing this. And so the Prophet ﷺ didn't actually go after those people in the dark. That's another thing, because it's like how do you prove that? So there are always going to be people who try to circumvent. It doesn't mean the deen is not working, or it's from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But outwardly, what's happened when ra'a minkum munkar? Whoever sees a munkar, you forbid it. What happens in someone's house or in some dark alleyway? There's nothing you can do. That's for the police, right? Yeah. Are there any questions on the forum?
The one question's from Instagram. What if the wrong happens in the same house where one stays, and the only way one can prove the wrong is to record the person? In this case, they were known to be a person of knowledge, but was actually frauding people and corrupted a high amount of youngsters.
Frauding people and
corrupting youth.
This is a very sensitive question, because it really depends if the harm that's caused becomes wajib on that person with their level of authority and their level of knowledge. And if it's something that, remember, the first thing is to actually speak to them. That's what it means. Man ra'a minkum munkaran falbi lisanihi. So if you can speak to them and confront them, but again, there are laws of all this. So whoever, that question, you can get in touch with us privately or like outside, because that's a sensitive question, especially once you're dealing with people of knowledge and people of authority, or there's legal implications. I'm not saying that you should take what I'm saying and have a legal implication on that. So please, if there are questions on how to enact something where you think that you might be in danger, your safety might be endangered, your whatever, your job, your marriage, then reach out and consult as someone who you trust, because it's much more likely that you'll avoid any of the problems associated by that. And there's just not enough details. You'd have to consult someone who understands the entire situation. But if you have the authority, you speak out to that person privately. That's the first way to try to stop something. And if it's illegal, go to the police. That's another way to stop something, Go to senior scholars or senior figures in the community. But if it's something illegal, go straight to the police. That's what if you can't change it, and if it's not stopping, that's the only other thing you can do. And it's up to them to try to determine that. But before you do this kind of public things or whatever, always make sure you consult.
There's a question, someone saying that they have a problem, they're unable to confront and control their desire, they get stuck and they need to break the cycle.
So the question is how to break that?
Yes.
Okay. There is a website called Purify Your Gaze. There's a program called Purify Your Gaze. Maybe you could start, you can look into that if there's an addiction there of desires. And Ramadan is coming up, so it's a very good time to try to break habits. But one of the first things is look at where that desire is being provoked and fulfilled, and cut yourself off from that. Whether it's your phone, if it's the internet, cut yourself off from that, make rules around it, and put barriers between you and the haram, and give yourself a break, go on a vacation or travel somewhere, so that you can break the habit, like a detox, and then put things in place. So it takes a plan. It's not something you can just do with willpower alone sometimes. So it takes a plan. Again, consult someone who, consult teachers, consult experts, professionals, in order to figure out a plan for that. May Allah give tawfiq. Other questions? Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care.